Good to see you, Jemel.
Same here, Josh. Same here, man.
You've got a lot going on right now.
I do. I really do,
Yeah.
Josh. Yeah.
I would love to hear what is on your plate at the moment. What does life look like for you?
Well, busy. Phoenix American Hospitality right now has we had an opportunity over the last 2 years to be able to reset ourselves with our current assets that we owned and allow ourselves the ability to be able to create more value with those assets as the markets got better after the pandemic. And so by doing so, we decided to take this opportunity to grow. And so growth means for us is that our current 11 hotels that we own, we're also focusing on bringing on an additional 4 hotels. We're actually in the stages of due diligence right now of bringing on 4 new hotels. And with that comes the ability to create more value for our investors as we continue to sustain ourselves with the 11 that we have. The goal by the end of the year, Josh, is to be somewhere around the 18 to 20 mark with hotels. And then our long-term growth strategy is to add an additional 2 to 3 hotels a year as we go forward.
One of the things I'm trying to do in these conversations is unpack the business of hotels because I think it's a mystery to some folks of how a lot of this stuff works. And I think, for example, one is the hotel name itself, a Hilton. A lot of people think all of those are owned by Hilton or
Right.
by the brand. But then you realize, okay, someone else owns that specific asset and then is paying the brand. So there's an owner. And then there's someone that's probably managing that hotel, maybe a different company. What I'd love to unpack a little bit with you right now is this within ownership, there's these kind of individual owners and individual owner operators. Then they grow a little bit, or sometimes they're part of a larger group of like a real estate investment trust.
hmm
And so I'd love to like maybe if you could explain some of that, like just the different views of ownership and where you fit in that.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question, and we could talk for years and times and minutes about it. But I'm just going to just kind of give a shorter version. I mean, there are various different types of real estate hotel owners out there. There is the individual hotel owner operator who takes his own assets, if you will, a cash, a capital within his family, or money handed down to him, and they create their own ownership piece. Obviously, they have the ability to be a part of a large brand like Hilton or a Marriott, or they can create what is an independent brand for themselves. You have the group that creates real estate investment trust funds for people to invest in those funds and get returns and work with a third party management company to be able to manage those assets, and those particular individuals manage just the funds. And then you also have fund managers who have the ability to create funds as well, but then again, be able to create an additional operating arm to operate those particular funds, which is what we fall into that particular category. We actually manage funds, but we also have our own operating arm to operate hotels under brands like Hilton and Marriott and Hyatt. And we do that because we like to sell the understanding to people that we have been in the business combined over 200 years based off of our team. And we have the ability to create value for those particular funds or those assets that are in those funds going through the process. So there are several different types of owner models when it comes to hotels. And then on the management side, Josh, you could either opt to manage those yourselves based off your experience, or you can go to a third party management company, which is what I probably would say. If you looked at our country right now, I'd probably say we're probably 60-40. 60% is all owner operators and 40% is third party managers. Don't quote me on that, but I do know that there are a lot more individual owner operators out there than there are third party management companies managing for those particular owners.
Yeah, and so that's probably a whole other conversation I'd love
It
to
is.
dive into
It,
sometime,
it,
like
it is.
about management companies, because that's fascinating in itself, right? It's like, okay, you own this property, now I'm gonna, as the management company, handle the operations and the performance and take a cut of the revenue and a percentage of the profit if we hit certain
Right.
metrics.
And Josh, there's also relationships out there with third party
Yeah.
management companies with individual owners where the third party manager gives what is called sliver equity into the
Mm.
actual
Hmm.
investment themselves, and they own
Okay.
a piece of it.
Yeah.
as well as manage
Mhm.
it. So there's all
Mhm.
different types of models that fall within
Yeah.
the hotel business or the
Fascinating.
hotel real estate portion of hotel.
Uh-huh. So, on the owner side, you said that the way that you handle it at Phoenix American is you create a fund for a specific grouping of hotels. You've got four right now that you're working on and going through due diligence on. Then that's its own fund that you're reaching out to your investors and others to invest into that specific fund.
That's correct.
And then you're taking that capital and deploying that to purchase and run those properties.
Correct, correct, correct.
And
And
then
and and
the
and in some cases, Josh, that for that we're actually doing due diligence on right now, it could be more, the more capital we raise, obviously, we can get more assets, but
yeah,
again, we don't just go grab hotels just to grab them. There's a formula that we use,
right.
there's a metric that we use to do that, and so these 4 that we're doing is we call them 4 packs. That's the kind of the
Okay.
terminology we use in our business, and right now, we feel the money that the capital that could be used for these assets and the value that could be created over a 3 to 5 year period with these particular assets, we just see the value in doing that. Now, again, we're not going to close this fund till maybe September or October. And if we raise additional capital and we see other opportunity, we'll deploy that capital to other real estate asset, hotel assets that are out there if we see value in it.
Got it. And the way that model works for an investor in this environment, if an investor is putting money into a fund, how does that work? They're getting, I would assume, paid out on distributions of the profit. And then they're also getting, do they get depreciation as
So,
well?
so that's a great question. And so the model is pretty simple. So, as a investor, you're actually purchasing shares of the particular hotel, of the
Yeah.
hotels that are in that fund. In
Right.
return, we give you distributions, a percentage of your money. It averages out to almost a 1% return on a monthly basis, but 12% return is the goal on a quarterly base. I mean, on an annual basis.
Okay.
Quarterly, we do bonus distributions where at the end of the quarter, all the additional profit from the I, we disperse that into anywhere up to 6%. It's not always 6%. It just depends on what the number is. But again, all that averages out annually to an investor to 12% returns. And so basically, when we go to sell the hotel, not only will they receive the proceeds from the sale, they'll also receive their initial money back that they gave when they invested, plus all of the returns that they've gotten on a monthly basis, along with the additional quarterly distributions as well.
Got it. And so the 12% is the goal for annualized return without even looking at the sale of the
Without even
future sale.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Is there anything you can share on that? Like, as far as what kind of annualized return do people often see, or have you seen on your side? What, including the sale of an asset at
Well,
the end
we
of the
well
cycle?
well, that's a good question. And the assets that we're currently sitting on, we're like in a new beginning of those particular assets. The goal is to be able to hold them for 5 years. So we haven't really seen anything for any sales proceeds. But right now, the last fund that we had paid on an annual return of 12%. They've seen quarterly bonuses of 6%. I mean, it's been very successful. We do webinars on a monthly basis, and we talk about some of the same stuff we're talking about right now. We really get
Yeah.
detailed into what we're doing so that
Okay.
people can understand what those returns. We have a team of people who you get a lot of specific questions, Josh, like if I gave you X, how much would I get and why? We
Yeah.
have people that answer those questions on the call
Uh-huh.
with you
Okay.
because there are specific formulas for the amount of money. And the minimum investment is 5,000. And then if you're at $100,000, it's a big
Wow.
number for me,
Okay.
so I couldn't calculate right now. But we have a team
Mm-hmm.
of individuals that can do
Mm-hmm.
that for you during that
Okay.
time. But yeah, as far as sales, we've not sold any of the assets yet. And so we don't really give a number, but the projections are this, guys. When we buy assets, we buy them at a discounted price point. And so because of that, when we get ready to go sell them, we create value. So that sales, that value increases. Of course, the property itself is going to appreciate, but we
Yeah.
also create value at the NOI level to help that growth in terms of the sales prices.
Yeah. Okay. And so, as a shareholder of that fund, you're owning a piece of that. And so, you would also see the value of the depreciation of the real estate as well.
Absolutely. Yes, you
Okay.
will. Yes. Yes, you
And
will. Good
so,
question.
how a lot of these funds I see are like you must be an accredited investor and also minimum check size $100,000. How do you all handle the minimum investment of 5,000? That seems like a lot more paperwork or something.
That's a good question. So we are operating under what is called a Reg A.
Okay.
Whereas a Reg A, you don't have to necessarily be an accredited investor. Like if you was in a Reg D, then yes, that'd be different. And we did that part of the world where we actually did investments to institutional investors.
Okay.
Now because of the Reg A, and the Reg A was created back in 2015 under the Jobs Act that President Obama signed. And so it allowed us to be able to market to individuals that wanted to invest in real estate. And so by us taking a part of that, yeah, you're right. I mean, we actually started off, Josh, at a minimum of $500. When we first started this particular new model,
Oh, wow.
it
Okay.
started off at $500, and because we saw a lot of success from that, we moved the carrot a little bit up to $5,000. And yes, it is a lot to manage, but we've seen our investment pool grow from 2,000 to almost 4,500 investors
Well,
because of that. And I think the average investment, don't quote me on this, but I think we're anywhere between $50,000 to $75,000 in average investments that we're seeing.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So, is that a lot of compliance kind of stuff? Is it Reg A like a certification that you have to get as a company
Yeah, so I
or
mean, just
okay.
the SEC compliant, we have to follow all the SEC guidelines and those type
Right.
of things. And so
Right.
if you read our circular, you'll be able to see all the different
Yeah.
things that we had to go to be able to do that. So yeah, there
Got
is some
it.
compliance stuff we had to go through to get.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole world.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to just back up a little bit and just hear a bit more of your story, right? So, currently you're chief operating officer at Phoenix American, is that
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And so how did you get started in the hotel business? What did that look like and how did you end up here?
So I took a very long journey. Let's start by saying I'm 25 years old and I've been in the
All right.
business for 34 years. Okay. So you do the math on that. But no, honestly, when I graduated from high school, a friend of mine, mother had asked me, what are you going to do for the summer before you go to the college? And I said, I'm not quite sure. I was a baseball player. And I said, I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to work out and then if the chips fall where they may. And she recommended, she said, hey, look, why don't you go downtown? I'm from New Orleans. That's my home. And she said, why don't you go downtown and see if there are jobs available for parking cars? And I said, you know what? That's a good idea. I'll go do that. So I go downtown New Orleans. And at this time in New Orleans, this is when every hotel downtown had valet parking. And I applied for a job with a particular company as a valet parker. And when I got that job right before I went to college, I worked that job in the summer. And as a young 18-year-old going to college, seeing cash in my pocket every single minute of the day resonated with me every summer when I went home. So fast track to my sophomore year in college, I go home for the summer once more, but this time I'm actually parking cars, Josh, and I'm looking inside the hotel and I'm looking at the front desk and I'm looking through this. And I remember this like yesterday, because that's why it's so easy for me to tell this story. I'm looking through the window of the hotel and a couple things was on my mind. One, I was parking cars for the Sheraton downtown New Orleans. And we also had a Sheraton in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is where I went to school at, which was Southern University in Baton Rouge. And one day, this was back when the general managers used to actually live in the hotel. And this general manager of this Sheraton would walk down at a particular time every day, and he would walk to his car in the garage. And of course, me being a valet parker, I saw the guy every day. I spoke to him. I said, hello. And this particular day, I said, hey, I said, my name's Jemel Jones. And I said, I'd like to work inside the hotel at the front desk. I said, there is a Sheraton in Baton Rouge, and I really don't want to keep coming home in the summer for college because I want to finish faster. And I said, is it possible you can write me a recommendation letter? Now, back in the day, nobody walked up to a general manager, Josh. I mean, that just wasn't heard of, right? He's the ultimate manager of the entire asset itself. And here I am, just an outside guy parking cars, running back and forth parking cars. And to make a long story short, he told me, he said, when you get off work, he said, come stop by my office. And I walk up to the office and the secretary in the hotel, or the administrative assistant in his hotel, I walk up and I said, hey, he asked me to come to his office, and she pulls out this letter and she gives it to me. And she said, here's the letter you'll need. And that's how I started working in the hotel. I started at the front desk in my sophomore year of college, graduated from college, and wound up getting into management, working in operations for probably, I would say, the next 6 or 7 years. And then getting up to, in all my career, most of it was in New Orleans. And I got to the point to where I had a choice to make. Do I want to stay in operations, or do I want to learn this new discipline called revenue management? And operations was great, but revenue management just really seemed like a really cool thing to learn at that time. And so I wound up working in the early 2000s on the revenue management discipline for like the next 4 years of my career, and brought me to the corporate office of Hilton on the RMCC, of like one of the first groups that was actually in there. Stayed there for a couple years, and then immediately branched out to the Hilton Garden Inn brand, the regional director of brand performance for the Hilton Garden Inn. And I was pegged for that job because I was given an opportunity to utilize both my revenue management skill set and my operations skill set. And that introduced me to the world of ownership, what owners do, the relationships they have with the brands, their expectations of what the brands bring to the table for them to create value for their hotels. I spent 7 years with the Hilton Garden Inn brand, allowing me the opportunity to understand the expectation of owners, the expectation of the brand, and then how both of those two models worked with each other and created value for not only just the brands and the hotel owners, but for customers, for our customers that we service. So that was probably, I would say, the high point of where do I see myself? You know, always say that, where I see myself at in 5 years. I think
Sure.
that was the high point of where I saw myself at in 5 years. And after that, my kids were entering high school, and I wanted an opportunity to spend some time with them. So the brand kept me on the road. I traveled all the time, went here, went there. And so I had an opportunity to step down from that. And I did that. And I went back to being a general manager, opening up a new hotel, living in Dallas and opening up a new hotel. Here's the cool thing about that. I got to work side by side with an owner, use my brand knowledge to help that hotel owner develop his particular asset, from the inception of him doing the renovation of it to all the way to opening it. And that wasn't just a job, right, Josh? That was an opportunity for me to, again, understand through the eyes of an individual owner. Was not operating, he was using third party management operation. And it helped me to understand what some of the goals and expectations of that owner was, and then the goal of the third party management company, and then now the brand. So now I
Wow.
went from two models to I'm looking at the eyes of three models. And once I got to a point to where I feel like I had achieved that, I joined PAH. I actually joined this company as a regional director of operations, getting back on the management side. But there is a little bit of a caveat. And the caveat is this: when I joined PAH, PAH was not just a hotel management company. PAH was an owner operator. H was a model that I had not been familiar with. Because remember, the models I worked under was the brand, the model I worked under was a management company, and the model I worked with was with an owner. Now, this PAH model, which was an owner operator, was a little bit different. And I got to work in it before the pandemic, which allowed me the ability to kind of branch myself out. Went from a regional director of operation to a vice president of asset management, from a vice president of asset management to the executive vice president of asset management. And then the COO put me in that role to restart the management company structure again for the hotel ownership, which brings me here today. So I'm basically at grassroots. We obviously, during the pandemic, most people may not know this, but we had a JV relationship. So we third partied a portion of our assets out, which allowed me to do the asset management portion of the job. And then after working with our investors and working with our CEO, we decided that we needed to enter back into the hotel management phase. And so I restarted that probably at the end of 2021, early 2022. And then now we're here building more assets that we're managing on our own. And that's my story, Josh. It's really boring.
No, I think you've got a lot of interesting stuff there. Something I find interesting about this is the stories of people that start at the ground floor, getting hooked on the business. There is something special about what you can do in hospitality and how you have a chance to serve others and make other people's lives better. And I think it's also such an interesting industry because of the ability to have this wandering path of working your way from valeting cars to becoming a chief operating officer, right?
Hmm.
And not making light of your story at all. With each one, you learned a new skill, you discovered new ways to create value, and then you took that skill and stacked it with the next one, and then understood the value of the brand and stacked that skill with the next one of, okay, what really matters to an owner now that I work for one directly? That brand performance job, living in the tension of the value that a brand can create and what a brand needs to perform well, and then the value that an owner can create and what an owner needs. There's tension there, and like living in the middle of those two things to find how to make both work well together, I think is such a superpower.
Not to mention the personality crisis I had to go through, right? Being on the
Yeah.
various different sides. But I'll be remiss to take this opportunity not to say thank you to a lot of the people that have given me the opportunity over my career to do that
Yeah.
because I didn't, when I was valet parking cars, I went to undergrad in
Yeah.
college to be an attorney. That was my focus. I wanted to be an attorney. And in reality, I was given an opportunity at each step to increase my career in this business. What I was passionate about the most in the hotel business was the various different personalities that I've met throughout building relationships with different people. And,
Yeah.
and, and that was a big deal for me. And I think the other thing is, when I talk about personalities, is where I look where I'm at today, my ability to be COO of an owner operator company really enhances my relationships with the brands because I understand what these hotel brands, and I try my best to bring that to the hotels themselves. Now, obviously, every hotel brand has a goal of creating more, whether it's supply, whether it's offering their customers more. And so, at some particular point in time, from a personality standpoint, they can impact us as owners, right? But I think because I understand the why in that model and those relationships, Josh, it makes my job a little bit more easier to be
Yeah.
able to maneuver around some of the things that take place.
Yeah. Great point. What's something that maybe you have a counterintuitive approach about when it comes to the way you think about your career?
Um, There's a couple of things. I think the first thing is being able to understand where people are who are leading our hotels. I've been in their shoes. So I totally have the ability to be focused on what it is that are their challenges and what they're looking for. So that's one piece of the pie. The other thing is that I understand creating value for my investors at the same time. So I
Yeah.
have to do all that through other
Yeah.
people, and I have to take and empathize with those other people, the things they're dealing with to get some of those things across. So I think what I bring to the table, and that's a great question, Josh, but I think, and I can talk about it forever, but I think what I really bring to the table is the uniqueness of being in the hotel operator shoes, being in the owner's shoes, and understanding the expectation of the investors at the same time, and making all three of those dichotomies, just that model work itself, taking pressure off of one and the other. And I think it doesn't help, like when these storms and stuff that pop up, but it doesn't matter. Like, I think at the end of the day, I'm unique because I have the ability to be able to attract all three of those particular audiences and get their attention and help them understand what direction we need to go in to be successful.
Yeah. Can I offer one as well? Because
Yeah.
I observe you, right? Like
Right.
I
Right.
getting to work with you, I see the skill that you have of if you were to break down your ability with relationships is the relationship at all levels, right?
Mhm.
So you're building trust with your partners, the owners, the fund manager, right? Everybody on your team in a way that is, I care about you, I want to help you succeed. And the other piece that I think sometimes people will go on one side or the other, right? Which is overly accommodating on the care side,
Mm.
where they don't then hold standards, right?
Right.
And I think you do a great job of holding those standards and continuing to push and be strong and push in a way that is pulling the best out of people and challenging those people. It's not just about It's not just about listening to what each person wants. It's about how do I challenge each of us to be at our best. And I see you doing that on a regular basis. And I think that's like a very kind of special attribute that you have.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. You said that I actually was on a call this morning. A really good friend of mine. We do these calls every once in a while, a month or quarter, and we talk about things. And that was something that he mentioned. He said, every year I've been knowing you for a very long time. And he said, the one thing I can tell you, you hold people accountable, but you do it to get the best out of them. And I think I get that actually from my dad. My dad's, he's always held me and my brother to a certain standard, and he does it to get the best out of us. And I just have that unique
Yeah.
characteristic. And I appreciate for sharing that because I won't go
Yeah.
around saying it to people, but I appreciate just
Right.
so
Yeah, yeah. In asking a question of what do you do differently, it's hard to sometimes brag about yourself in that way, but that is something I see that you do differently. And the other part that I'm thinking about is every time that a new deal is happening, there's so much within this business and your business of a new acquisition or a change of structure or, like you said, storms happening,
right.
whether it's a literal storm or it's just life in general, there's like big stuff going on that you've got this ability to stay calm and focused and optimistic, solutions oriented, and remain unaffected by the turmoil, which I think is this leadership skill that oftentimes doesn't get discussed.
It's a good point,
Mm.
Josh. Yeah. It's a learned behavior. Our CEO, Perch Nelson, he's perfect at it. I got to tell you, when I say perfect, he's
Yeah.
mastered the ability, all those things you talked about, whether it be money issues or whether it be storm issues like physical storms or whether it just be
Yeah.
personal issues. He's been good enough to lead by example on that. And so I'm the type of guy that I'm loyal to strategy, right? So if you bring strategy to the table and I see that's going to benefit everybody else, I'm going to fall right in line with. And so I tell you that behavior is learned as well, because in our climate, you have to be calm. Just the other day, I was at the Marriott conference, the owners conference, and I had a guy, we were talking about how cyclical our business is, right?
Yeah.
How we've been through so much. I mean, obviously, I've been in the business for 30 something years. So there's several different storms I've been through, right? And at the end of the day, you have to have some type of ability to remain calm because you're going to go through something. You just don't know what it is. And my goal as the chief operating officer is to have everybody prepared. And so I can't have everybody prepared if I'm losing a little hair that I do have on my head. So I try to remain focused on that. So you're right, Josh. That's a skill
Yeah.
set that you take that very seriously. We get better at, because I want everybody to understand that at the end of the tunnel there's light.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I love that. Let's switch gears a little bit here. You touched on this earlier about this idea of there is a need for where you sit and where you live in terms of your company in value creation, right? Like that you can, because of the work that you will do, you can purchase an asset, hopefully at a good value, but that when you get involved, you're going to start pulling levers and actually create value.
That's right.
And I'd love for you to just explain a little bit more of that. Like, what are some of those components that you're doing that would then unpack that value?
That's a great question, Josh. And of course, guys like you are a part of stuff like that of what I do. And the biggest thing is that when we're looking for assets, we do look for hotels that are positioned in markets with value that's untapped by that particular hotel. And what I mean by that is some of the hotels that we may go out and purchase may have opportunity that they're leaving on the table, not just from a sales side, but it could also just be from the product itself. Obviously, because we're acquiring assets, we look for minimal cost to deploy capital into the hotels themselves, but we always know that there's capital that need to be deployed. So the first thing is, does the property have the physical attributes to attract more business to the hotels? Meaning, for those of you in layman's terms, do they need a product improvement plan? And what does that product improvement plan look like? And where is it going to have the hotel in terms of creating more value? Now, what type of value? Bringing more customers to the hotel, a customer base that they don't have. So we start by, where is this hotel positioned on the STAR report, the Smith Travel Research report, within their comp set, and what opportunities are they leaving on the table because of the first thing, the product improvement plan. So once we get that under control, The second created value is pricing. How is this hotel positioned in the market from a pricing standpoint? Are they creating value there? Are they too high? Are they too low? What are we seeing in the market? Are they touching every segment that's operating in the market? Some hotels, we like to buy hotels in suburban, high business, corporate environments, simply because the more corporate demand, the better opportunity you see to be able to pick up more or additional companies that you have not touched or tapped into. And so again, it's just what type of brand is it? What type of hotel is it? Is the product good enough to be able to attract a different corporate customer? All that happens in number two. Number three is, what is the hotel spending in terms of cost to manage the hotel? Are they overspending on product? Is there an opportunity to streamline some of the cost aspects? Are they aggressive with hiring labor and not using contract labor? All of that impacts the actual profit margins of the hotel. Where do we see opportunity with that? I think a lot of people look at hotels and they say to themselves, oh, they're using contract labor, so if I go on the market, I'm going to do the same thing. Not necessarily. It really depends on your culture and how aggressively you go after recruit. We like to recruit our own people into the hotel. So that would be number three. Number three is just the cost aspect of it. And we don't just look at the labor. We don't just look at how much they're spending on supplies. We also look at how the taxes affecting the hotel, how is the insurance affecting the hotel, are there lease agreements that the hotel doesn't need? All those things impact the dollar. And so we make sure that we're controlling that. And the last piece of the puzzle is that at the end of the day, what other areas of the market are not being leveraged? The relationships. We build relationships with the city. We build relationships with the CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, because those relationships leverage more value for customers coming into your particular hotel.
Yeah.
And
That's
we
great.
do
Yeah.
that, Josh, with the expectation of including that information into our underwriting.
Mhm.
We'll do a first blush, right? And we'll look at this thing and we'll take a step back and we'll say to ourselves, okay, at the end of the day, while we're doing this thing, are all these pieces that I just drew out to Josh, is all that doable in this market? And if all those boxes aren't checked off, we take that underwriting and we put it on the side and we say, you know what, we're going to come back to that and take a look at that. But all of those things, that's our value creation, Josh. We look at ways to increase occupancy, ADR, build a better product for the brand and for the customer, the hotel position correctly into the market, and not just from a marketable on paper in the internet standpoint, but even like where it's located on the street. Is it on the
Yeah.
highway? Is it tucked away in some mall, or is it next to a hospital? And all those things play a factor in value creation.
How does that process work? Do you get like a feasibility study done by an outside firm if you're looking at a deal? How do you start that process?
So we do have a relationship with CoStar. We do utilize the information from CoStar to create our own feasibility. Like, the only time we probably would do feasibilities if we're not familiar with the market at all.
Okay.
Obviously, we have 200 years of combined experience in this office. So I have
Yeah.
our vice president of sales, who has been around the country and the world doing sales, and obviously my regional director of operations. He's been around the country doing operations, and we kind of leverage those individuals first before we feel
Yeah.
like if we go into a market we don't know anything about, Josh, then we'll probably go get a feasibility done for us
I
to
get
figure
it.
that out.
Okay.
That's a great
And
question.
would a hotel hand you a packet of like, here's our performance currently, like here's what a mix of sales
So,
looks like?
so once we feel good with our underwriting, what we typically will do is do a LOI to purchase the
Okay.
hotel. And
Yep.
then once we enter into that contract and earnest money is given and due diligence start, then we will begin to grab the information. So
Okay.
answer your question, your original question, because that was a great question, but to answer the original question, the data that we really use and go off of is the STAR report before we even get to
Yeah.
that phase.
Got
The
it.
STAR report gives us enough information about the market, but we also have CoStar, and CoStar allows us the ability to look at the market even in a deeper perspective without us even physically being there.
Got it. So with the star report, you're seeing, okay, specific days that possibly they're underperforming. You see what hotels they have in their competitive set and if that really makes sense or not.
Right. And through
You're
the phase of you doing the underwriting, your financial packet is shared. So you're able to get T12s,
okay.
depending on how much information of the T12. I mean, of course, we have to do non-disclosures. So we sign non-disclosures to get the information. And then
Mm-hmm.
once we get the information, it helps us put a picture together of
Yep.
what's being left on the table.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So those four things really cover all of the stuff, right? Like, do we need to do anything to change the product to make it perform better?
Yep.
What are the levers that we can do in terms of pricing and positioning to make sure it's performing well? Then it's going to profitability of like, what are the levers that we can pull to become more cost effective and still be aligned with our culture and who we are as a company and drive long term value and performance? What are these other kind of potential things in the market that we can leverage? Like you said, convention visitors bureau and these other funnels that could drive
Right.
new demand into
Right.
that hotel.
Right. And what that
Yeah.
looks like from a number standpoint, when we're doing our performa and we're doing our underwriting, we have an equity yield that we look for in the first year, and that number is typically around the 10 or 11% number. And if we don't see ourselves achieving that, then we go to the table. Our acquisition teams, we go and we discuss and say, hey, look, why are we not able to hit these yield numbers that we're looking for? And then discussions begin. And we start bullet pointing those things right now. I was actually talking to an individual the other day who was asking me how things were going with the 4-pack. And I was letting them know, hey, look, we got a meeting on next Friday with the acquisition team to determine what type of opportunity, if we miss the yield in the first year, what is our opportunity for making those things up? So we have calculated numbers and processes and metrics that we use. But the big picture is the four you just went over. That's
Yeah.
how we create value. And if we can't create that, then we'll move away from it. Josh, we have to have 3 out of those 4 boxes checked before we move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and I like those as building blocks too, right?
Right,
Because it's like if you don't fix the product, then you can't get the right pricing.
right,
Once you get the right pricing, then it's a question about profitability.
right.
And then it's about feeding in more business. But
That's
like
correct.
solve those other three things first, because if you start driving new demand, it may not convert if you don't have the product fixed or the pricing fixed. But once you get those first three fixed, once you turn on the faucet of new demand, then you're driving all of that revenue at a much higher profitability as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. And that's, again, without that formula for us, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. We're in Dallas, Texas. We own no assets in Texas. And it's not because we don't want to own assets in Texas. It's just that the ones we put through those check boxes that we just talked about, we haven't been able to get 3 or 4 or 4 out of 4 yet.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything's wrong with Texas. It's just
Right.
our model, and it's it's just how we create value for our investors.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're going to wind up finding one, but again, we have to go through those check marks.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's something I heard from when I was talking to Sagar at Witness Investments. He said an important part of all of this is knowing what your swim lane is and knowing what your principles are as a company and having that rubric so that you really, as deals come through, even if it does look like a great opportunity, if it doesn't fit our specific criteria as a company, we're going to pass.
Right.
We need to stay focused on what we know and what we're good at.
That,
And that doesn't mean there aren't other great things out there. It's just this is our lane and this is how we can really add value right now.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what else do you want to talk about?
I, we could be here all day. I think you asked some really good questions. I love talking to you.
Yeah,
A
same.
lot of people don't know Josh is a brain I pick. I pick his brain every now and again, but he knows so much, so I try to stay away from it because it's a big crystal ball. Josh, I thank you a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and tell who we are, who I am, and what we bring to the table. We're very serious about what we do here at Phoenix American Hospitality. And I think the only thing I do want to leave you with and everybody is that out of all the models I've worked for, I think there's great value in the owner operator model. And specifically because of the fact that no one's going to manage your asset like you.
Yeah.
And so we take these things seriously, physically go out on the road, work with the hotels, shake everybody's hand, talk about culture that they're building at their own facility, speak to guests. Those are the really cool things about my job. And then the focus items are the things we talked about. You know, we're creating value for our investors. And just like today, I'm about to get off this call with you. The first meeting I have today it's my sales and revenue meeting. And we're sitting down looking at pricing, and we're sitting down looking at value that we may have missed out on in the past and what we can do to fix it so we're not having that problem anymore.
Yeah. That's right. I love that. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank
And
you
yeah, I'd
for
love to
having
do
me.
it again. Yeah.
Yes.
Good to see
Yes.
you.
Let's do a part two.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jamel.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.